Welcome to NextLabs Expert Q&A Series. This series was designed to inform you of relevant cybersecurity topics via expert knowledge.
Welcome back to part 2 of our episode on securing data in the age of AI. In part 1, we explored the key challenges organizations face and best practices for protecting sensitive AI data and maintaining the integrity of AI-generated insights. In part 2, Alex will help us dive into balancing business value with data protection and the tools organizations can use to secure AI-driven pipelines. So, Alex, how should organizations balance business value with data protection in AI initiatives?
Carefully. I say that tongue in cheek. There is no solid answer. The answer for every organization is different. With that said, it's no different than every other business decision senior executives and boards make. This is what they're paid to do. You balance strategy against risk without stifling innovation. Now, the stifling innovation part is really more emerging technology related than it is a lot of other disciplines, but it's still there. So you're trying to create business value at reasonable risk without stifling innovation. A lot of words. There is no fundamental rule. There are no set of established guidelines. In practice, the number one, and these are my words, consistent with what you see written in a lot of other places, just positioned a little differently. When it comes to generating business value with a new technology, the absolute first step is to try things knowing you're going to fall without being reckless. What does that mean? It depends on the use case. The risks in AI are driven by the use case, which includes the data. Okay? The data inherently has its own issues, but how you're using it, where you're using it, who's using it, has a very different impact as it evolves in different ways. So if I'm using your healthcare information and it's controlling medical devices, let's say it's regulating a pump, right? You have diabetes, it's regulating your insulin, and that device goes wrong, that could be a very serious problem. If the data is being used to craft a treatment plan that is reviewed and finalized by your long-term physician, it's the same data, but the risks are vastly different, right? One is because you're dealing with automation, it's a direct control, there's no human in the loop, which, by the way, human in the loop is not actually the right term. Human in the loop, from a pure sense for terminology in the AI world, it's really a form of training where the human is telling the model whether it's got it right or not. But that's an aside. We can use the term if we want to, but it's slight misapplication, which could get you sideways when you're dealing with international standards and the like, right? So there's vastly different implications on those, right? So you have to be very wary of the use case. I am a huge advocate, especially when you're trying out something new. Make not wrong decisions. Don't worry about making right ones. Worry about making not wrong ones. I believe very heavily in having sandboxes in place. What's a sandbox? Well, you could try things, and if it gets out of control, it doesn't get outside the sandbox. It's sequestered from the rest of the enterprise, so people don't get hurt. Another example with a sandbox is because you're trying things and things always go wrong. As you figure it out, it often becomes useful to just break down everything you've been doing and reconstitute it and start all over again. They are just fantastic, right? You put guardrails in place. But again, it's the use case. Part of what you should be doing as a business, and the EU AI Act does this extremely well, stack ranking the use case in categories, like say 4 categories. You can do it in 5 if that's the way you want it. That really talk about what guardrails and practices are necessary for each one of those. All the way at the top, are prohibited use cases. You can't do this with AI. Autonomous weapon systems. Let's face it, an autonomous weapon system, in a lot of ways, given the state of the technology and what we're dealing with, that's a war crime waiting to happen. All the way down on the other end, we have spam filters and we have game applications. They're really low risk. Nobody's going to get hurt. Nobody's going to die, right? So categorize by those risk categories. Create those 4, 5 risk categories. There's plenty of suggestions out there about what use case goes in which bucket. Start there. Remember, if you put it in the third bucket today, doesn't mean you can't move it to the fourth bucket tomorrow. Just because you make a decision today doesn't mean you can't change it tomorrow, right? Um, so a lot of this is around exploration and knowing your boundaries. Your risk appetite statement has to evolve for AI, right? Have we ever looked at it from the perspective of AI? I also recommend going through whatever your tool is. Risk professionals, when I say this, will often throw tomatoes at me. Take a look at your risk register. Go through your risk register and ask yourself, has any of this changed with AI? Has it increased the efficacy, the efficiency of an attack like we're seeing with phishing? Does it allow the adversary to adapt quicker? Can they do better research? Is the velocity of the attack higher? Is there more volume from attack? What's going on there, right? Is it really changing the world? And some of it you might find out that AI can help you better mitigate what's going on. And let me explain why some risk professionals will start throwing tomatoes at me when I say that. When you look at enterprise risk management and chief risk officers, at that level, they aren't dealing with risk registers generally, right? They're dealing with other types of tools and they're looking at it a little differently. Practitioners are dealing with risk registers. And that's why I use the risk register as the example, because a lot of people watching this video are practitioners, right? You deal with risk registers. So I highly recommend you looking at your risk register and ask yourself, how does it change? Right? The likelihood or impact. How does AI change the likelihood or impact? One of my favorite examples is a few years ago when ChatGPT came out, there was a 173% increase in chatter on the dark web by malicious actors on how to use AI. There was a 53% increase within the first 6 months of ChatGPT coming around about the effectiveness of AI. Um, you probably remember going back, say, 5 years, right? You were probably getting emails about magical cures for diseases you didn't have, long lost relative who wanted to send you $1 million if you send them $10,000 first. We don't see that. We don't see the grammar issues. We don't see the punctuation issues. We see countries like Japan who have never been affected by phishing attacks because there weren't a lot of malicious actors that were native Japanese speakers, right? AI has changed all that. Revisit your risk register.
Building on that, which emerging technologies or tools are helping secure AI-driven data pipelines?
The short answer is mostly the same ones that we were using to secure data before AI, right? So in a lot of ways, in principle, there's not much difference, right? A minute ago, I talked about using PET, privacy enhancing technologies. That came out of the privacy world. It's finding applications a ton of places. Privacy by design, right? By definition is about privacy. If you look at the principles in privacy by design, it's really good to be used other places. We are also seeing um, international and national standards starting to merge privacy and security. Why? Because at the end of the day, at the core, it's a lot about protecting data, right? There's also things about protecting people and infrastructure and all that, but a lot of what we talk about and the way we gauge and measure our protectiveness is about data because data is the new oil and it has been for quite some time. The world is just starting to, I don't want to say wake up to it. It just starting to, looking in the rearview mirror, understanding what's been going on for quite some time. Now, some areas that are new. We have seen a rapid increase in the use of synthetic data, which is basically manufactured for your reasons. Now, interestingly enough, um, a lot of people with an enterprise testing or resilience or chaos engineering background will tell you they've been using synthetic data for quite some time. Well, they have, but now it's going over to the world of AI for a lot of reasons, not only protecting the data, but also because it's so valuable and so important to training the model. You can actually create data that's not going to give the model bad behavior. We've seen a lot of tools like CI/CD tools actually merging, migrating their way over to the AI world. Right. So in principle, there's a lot of things going on that are very much alike. Some of the areas that are very, I shouldn't say new, but they're getting highlighted. First and foremost, it is the increase, the dramatic increase of the human, like checking the outputs, checking the inputs, doing fact checking, validating data, using multiple teams, right? You can have models to check models. I saw one study that demonstrated if you take two LLMs, both with about 80% accuracy, which, believe it or not, tends to be the higher end of the accuracy in LLMs. When you have an LLM of 80% accuracy, check another LLM of 80% accuracy, it ends up with a 96% accuracy, right? I'm sure that depends a lot on particular products and the data, but you get the point, right? Two things that are not perfect get you a hell of a lot closer to being perfect than if you didn't. I've seen organizations that actually spend time teaching their folks how to write prompts. So they teach them prompt engineering, right, to protect the data, but also protect the outputs. We also see what many organizations that I'm very happy about are starting to understand the importance of your contracts with the service provider, the people you buy or rent your AI from, on like what we talked about before. Is it on a dedicated instance that's for me and me alone? Guarantees that you're not using my data to train somebody else's model. Guarantees that the data will be destroyed when the processing is done, the contract is done, or upon direction. The guaranteeing of sovereignty, which is a fancy way of saying never leave the designated jurisdiction. And we also see some models will come out and be delivered as a service where they're compliant with whatever PCI DSS, HIPAA. I mean, we can all go down the list, right? These are very, very important real world applications. Give you an example, the legal community. Lawyers, for the most part, law firms, don't usually have their own intellectual property, but they have everybody else's, right? So it's very important that they protect that. What we've seen, and again, I'm very happy about it. Good to know people were working on it before it became a major issue. We see a lot of models that are being offered for specific communities like the legal community. It's a very old concept that's being applied now over to the AI world. So if there's any one message underlying this, is that history doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes. So a lot of what we've seen used in other areas is being used and pulled into the AI space, which, by the way, is at the end of the day is the core of innovation. So usually when people talk about innovation, they think of the Thomas Edison light bulb appearing at the top of their head, when in reality, most innovation is really taking learnings and experiences from other areas and applying them differently and then feeding in some special sauce, right? That's basically what we're seeing in the AI world today around data governance. So pretty much everything you've ever done and everything you've ever learned about data governance and CI/CD and testing is directly applicable to everything you're doing in AI. pretty much everything you've learned and used before is directly applicable. It's just you're going to have to tweak it a little.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing your expertise. That wraps up our two-part series on securing data in the age of AI. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned to the next episode where we will have more insights from a new expert.